Now, because the entire lesson centers on the next part, which is the activities, this is an integral part of any lesson plan. And so far, it's just been introduction. So that part of your lesson, the activating background, the review, if you want to call it that, the overview, that probably is going to take between 5 and 10 minutes, depending on what you discussed in the last class, what concepts you want to review. So the bulk of your lesson is going to be contained within the activities section. And there are a variety of activities. There were many ideas that were listed in the readings that you did for last night. And so you can incorporate any one of those. But there are some activities that are not necessarily listed in English language learning material. And I have found that these types of activities are very well received eventually. Sometimes they're met with some resistance because they really do make the students engage. They have to participate. But because this whole entire class has talked about the integration of reading, writing, and vocabulary along with listening and speaking skills, these activities are specifically designed to make those skills integrated and to require the students to participate using the language. Because many of our students, once they leave our class, they don't necessarily have to use English except when they go out or they shop, because at home they use their L1. And so they don't necessarily have that much of an opportunity to use English. Now, of course, because I want you to give homework assignments, they will have their homework assignments to do, but that won't really engage their listening and speaking as much as their reading and writing at home. So what I want to do is I want them to apply the reading and the writing that they've done in bulk at home to the listening and speaking that they're going to be doing within the classroom. So what type of activities foster this type of environment? I have just a few listed. There are many more, and I've linked the other options on to our Moodle site, but these are the ones that I want to highlight the most. First of all, the hardness discussion. I'm not going to spend that much time in this video discussing it because there is a separate video available called Hardness Discussion. And it's really the premise of all of these other activities that I include in my classroom, because of the philosophy behind the hardness discussion is that the students are in charge of their own learning. I am not doing that much instruction within the classroom. I am observing, I am monitoring, I am giving language feedback, I am sometimes interjecting a question, especially if I'm doing a Socratic type seminar. It's not on the list here, but it is on the list that is included in the link on Moodle, because Socratic seminar is one of the better known ones because it's just the professor asking questions of the students, where you start with a more general question and you focus into more of an analytical type of question. And so I didn't highlight that one as much because many people are aware of that, and it's not that new, obviously, since it was started by Socrates. And so the hardness discussion, please watch that video because I definitely want to see that incorporated somehow within your lesson plan, because it is a very good way to keep the teacher from dominating the conversation, because the teacher sits outside of the circle and writes feedback for later questioning, or for specifically for English language learners for a specific type of language feedback that you might be focusing on in that class period, such as the TH sound. Are they saying they, them, those instead of they, them, those? And so that would be something that I would give them as I was observing and feedback. And so we'll start with the fishbowl and how to create that fishbowl environment. And the fishbowl itself is descriptive of this type of activity. So what I would do is I would have 3 to 4 questions prepared, and they would focus on the reading and the writing assignment that students had to do. Because anytime I give students a reading assignment, there is also a writing assignment that is included with it, whether it is answering specific discussion questions, or it is writing a summary, or writing a reflection, or writing discussion questions that they themselves would use, which I'll show how I use those once we get to other activities. But for the fishbowl, I would specifically prepare questions. And they're not always, well, they're never comprehension questions. They're analysis questions. They are questions that deal with concepts that we might be studying as a way in our writing. For instance, if I gave them a compare and a contrast essay to read, and eventually they were going to be writing their own compare and contrast essay, I would start with, in the basic question, what were the writers comparing and contrasting? What were the comparisons, and how did they contrast it? This seems like a comprehension question, but it makes them break it down. And so that would be one question. So there would be 3 to 4 students, and obviously it depends on the size of the class, how many people I put inside of a fishbowl. Because I like it not to be more than 3 different ones, because after that it gets a little bit long. Because within each fishbowl, they speak for 5 to 7 minutes. And I give them the question. I don't prompt anything beyond that. And I don't tell which student to start. And they sit there for a moment and think about the question, all scared about not wanting to be the one to start the discussion. And then they're assigned a number, the way that I do fishbowl. And there's different ways to do fishbowl. But this one I give every student a number. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have 16 students. There are 4 people with 1s, and so on. And so in the group, they would know who was the 1, who was the 2, and all the 1s would be giving feedback and writing comments about what that student said, or if they noted any language errors, or if they noted anything that the student had been struggling with, who they actually did it right. You did great THs. We heard the, and it sounded good. Or it could be content-based. I like the point that you made about, and they would write this down on their Post-it note. And one of the requirements that students have to have for my class, one of their supplies, is they all have to buy Post-it notes, and they have to have them with them in class every day. Because that's the way I give feedback, and that's the way they give feedback to each other. Or sticky notes if you want to get a non-Post-it note brand. And then they would answer that question for 5 to 7 minutes. That question's pretty simple, so it would only be 5 minutes. Then the second group would come in with a different question. They would be given feedback. Then the third group, then the fourth group. So all of the students are actively engaged in the conversation, but only the 4 in the middle are the ones doing the speaking. Everyone else is listening and getting ready for the next section, because then I would go to a different activity where we would go into a large group and we would discuss what all of the groups had discussed, and we would compile those discussions together. And I'll skip the panel for now, but I would go into a round table for that discussion where we all sit around and we talk about it, we discuss it, we offer our opinion, and we offer our analysis. And so by doing that, they're taking that section of the discussion, and once they go to their writing, they can recall, they have been taking notes. They always have to take notes during discussions, and they can take their notes and they can apply it to what they're going to write about. I even do it when I teach them about how to write a compare and a contrast essay. So they have to write a compare and a contrast essay. So what they do is they go and research what is a compare and a contrast essay. We have a fishbowl about it, and then we have a round table about it. So they're learning, but I'm not standing up there explicitly describing what a compare and a contrast essay is. But they're taking a reading that they've done, and they are seeing an example of a compare and a contrast essay. They're talking about it, they're analyzing it, and now they're going to choose their subject, and they are going to write a compare and a contrast essay. So that is a way to integrate the reading, writing, vocabulary, because they're having to learn the vocabulary because they have to discuss it. They have to use the vocabulary in the discussions that they have. And this can be a simplistic reading, or it can be a more intense, higher level reading. It can be used at any level. But it makes the students engage with the vocabulary, engage with the sentence structure, but they have a model because they are talking about the text. And I always say, go back to the text. What does the text say? And then they can read snippets of it, not long parts, but just snippets, because it teaches them how a sentence is structured. And they hear themselves say it. So let's go back to the panel. And the panel is a scary thing for those students who are on the panel. But when I make an assignment, I say, read the following article or articles in preparation for a panel discussion in which the questions will be posed. And I usually list 4 questions. And the 4 students that are chosen at random when they come into the class will speak for 2 to 3 minutes about the question, about the topic that they have had time to think about the night before. And then they speak about it, whether it's opinion-based or reflection-based or content-based. And then after each person has spoken, the rest of the class is required to ask a question of the panelist as it relates to their specific topic that they have reviewed. And sometimes it's controversial. Sometimes it's such as the article we read this week in our class, 2 Cheers for Sweatshops, in that the authors proposed that sweatshops were a necessary component of society, and it caused a lot of discussion and a lot of good argument. And obviously that's why I chose the essay, that many students had experienced these, not themselves but their parents, and that they had moved away so that they wouldn't have to be in that type of environment. So they had much to say about it. But they were on the panel. We had the question, but everybody is engaging with this. Then there is the round robin. And in a round robin, I usually like to use this when they are sharing a topic about what they're going to write about, or if there was something that we read about that they had to research a specific item or a specific aspect of this subject. And so in the round robin, everyone speaks for 1 to 2 minutes, and we go around the room, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way around, and we're all sitting in a circle. We're not sitting at desks, we're sitting in a circle. And the students have to speak, and they have to be prepared. And I tell them in their homework assignment, in preparation for a round robin, choose the topic that you are going to write your argumentation essay about, and give us details about why you chose that. So they're doing the research for their writing, they're reading to write, and then they're coming into the class and they're sharing about it, and they're articulating what this particular subject is about, why they chose it, where they plan to go with it. And so that would be how the round robin is used. And then we also have debates. Debates are fun, and my favorite way to do a debate is to tell them the night before, read this material, such as 2 Cheers for Sweatshops, and be prepared for a debate, either for or against. And so I just go through the room, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. The 1s are for, the 2s are against. Prepare your argument. And so they have an opening statement, and I give the group between 5 and 10 minutes to prepare their opening statement, and one student does the opening statement, and they have to convince the other side that either for or against the topic, such as sweatshops, and they use the text. They can use personal experience. They can use their own research. Some, if they know a debate is coming up, they do extra research, so that's teaching them research skills. It's teaching them how to articulate quickly their opinions, because in a debate they can go back and forth. So because they get 5 minutes to speak, 5 minutes to speak, and sometimes one person does it, sometimes 2 or 3 people do it as they make their opening statements, and then we have the rebuttals. And I'm not always the mediator, but typically I'm the mediator. But sometimes I have a student that becomes the mediator, especially as we go through the semester and they understand how it works. But even in a lower level, you could have a debate about living with people who speak your same language, or living among a more diverse group, which is more advantageous. Or something as simple as, are cell phones an advantage or a disadvantage in societies, families, relationships? But still, they're using the language, and they are being able to articulate what is important. They're able to analyze, and when they're having to think that quickly, they can't, they can sometimes, but it helps them to be able to stop translating before they speak, because they know that they have 1 to 2 minutes to get their ideas out. Now, they could have practiced it at home, especially if I told them in 1 to 2 minutes in a round robin, give me the details of what you plan to do for your thesis. But more importantly, they're integrating that reading, writing, vocabulary, and the listening, speaking into the activities of the class, and they're moving. Each activity, I try not to make it more than 15 minutes. So they move from activity to activity, and they're engaged. They can't go to sleep because they never know when I'll say, okay, Harkness, and everybody has to move into a Harkness discussion, which watch the video so you understand what that is. And then it's an active classroom. Very rarely do I lecture for more than 5 or 10 minutes, and that would only be if I had a specific concept, such as a mini lesson about articles, or a mini lesson about a comma splice, or a run-on problem that I was noticing in the writing that I felt like needed to be addressed to the whole entire class. And then that would be when I would speak for that long period of time. But even then, I would give the mini lesson, but then they would use their own authentic writing to correct the comma splices or to correct the article placement within the activity of a small group or pair work, which I didn't include that on this activity list because that's typically how people like to do interactive and communicative learning. And so I wanted to go outside the norm and describe some of the other ones. So, but if you want more details about how other people use it, there is a link for active learning in a classroom, and it gives even more than what I've articulated here. But the whole concept of the student being in charge of his or her own learning is detailed is detailed more explicitly in the Harkness video that I've linked for you, and it gives the philosophy behind it and why it's important. Because the fishbowl, the panel, the round table, the round robin, all of those are modeled off of that Harkness discussion.